From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sweeney Gray. We begin in Mexico, where there has been outrage and incredulity at the news that police have found the bodies of 3 missing students who were kidnapped over a month ago in Guadalajara. State Prosecutor Raul Sanchez said the film students were killed by members of the New Generation Jalisco cartel. Sanchez said cartel members also doused their bodies with acid to try and make their corpses unrecognizable. Protesters outside the state governor's house said they don't believe the official version and compared it to the government account of the 43 missing Ayotzinapa students. 2 of the 8 alleged criminals have been apprehended and ordered to stand trial.
The investigations have not yet been concluded. We are working with the same intensity, with responsibility and determination to bring to light the whole truth of these unfortunate acts.
From the interviews we gather, they are known to have been one of the students. That is how he was killed, and they had to execute the other 2 people.
Our correspondent in Mexico City, Pablo Perez, has more.
Just a month after the disappearance of the 3 film students in Tonalá, Jalisco, the state attorney in a press conference stated that they had found the remains of the 3 missing young men in a nearby ranch. The attorney theory is that they were abducted by the local cartel, Jalisco Nueva Generación, executed on site and dissolved in acid, which is a common practice for the criminal cartels to dispose of their bodies and clear them of all evidence that can inculpate them later. This is something that is happening in Jalisco every so often. Just a couple of weeks before that, 3 Italian men were abducted by local police and then delivered to the cartel. So that tells us about the collusion that exists between the authorities and the criminal organization, which makes investigation so much harder.
We thank Pablo Perez for that report. A man accused of the murder of the Mexican journalist Javier Valdez has been arrested. Mexico's Interior Minister Alfonso Navarrete announced his arrest via Twitter. Valdez was an award-winning journalist who covered Mexico's powerful drug cartels. He was gunned down outside the offices of the Rio Doce newspaper in May of last year.
Yesterday, we arrested in Tijuana, Baja California, 26-year-old Heriberto N., who was identified as the alleged murderer of the journalist Javier Valdez Cárdenas. Heriberto N., identified as one of the conspirators of this crime, is linked with a drug trafficking group operating in the region. We assume the murder of Javier Valdez Cárdenas, correspondent of La Jornada newspaper and founder of Sinaloa's Rio Doce online newspaper, is linked with several journalistic investigation reports covering topics such as drug trafficking and organized crime.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's campaign events continue in the northern state of Carabobo, where he's been greeted by large crowds. The campaign officially launched Monday with a message of peace, economic prosperity and social protection in an independent Venezuela. President Maduro also spoke about his plan for a monetary conversion that will begin on June 4th as an important tool to overcome the economic war.
Maduro has been fighting against this economic war that they are waging. Every day it's like a bottleneck. They keep closing the opportunities to try to make us Venezuelans desperate, to make us to take to the streets to protest with violence, to kill each other for food and for medicines. But I am still supporting this revolution because this revolution opened up so many opportunities for us. This revolution took so many more Venezuelans into account and gave us education.
And earlier in the eastern state of Delta Amarcuro, President Maduro criticized the proposals of the opposition candidate Henry Falcón to dollarize the Venezuelan economy.
We must continue fighting for economic and monetary independence, and only with our own instruments, our own efforts, our own currency. Venezuela will be able to take the path to actual prosperity with equality and social justice. That is my response to the candidate for the presidency, Henry Falcón. I think he's very extremely mistaken, very badly advised, and the Venezuelan people are going to punish him on May 20th. Because on May 20th, we will achieve a great victory, and the people will decide if they want the dollar or the bolivar. I am certain that they will vote for the bolivar.
And the country's foreign minister, Jorge Arias, is at the United Nations for a high-level meeting on peace building. He said the tools that the UN have should be used to prevent conflicts and not to interfere in the domestic affairs of states.
The movement of non-aligned countries underscores the fact that there cannot be development without peace, and no peace without development. Therefore, we must work together and double our efforts and improve synergies between peacekeeping and peace-building activities, as appropriate to attain the overall objective of sustaining peace. The movement of non-aligned countries is fundamentally committed to peace-building and sustaining peace.
Thank you very much.
The president of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, is also at the United Nations. He said they were proud to be able to share their history of conflict in the hope that it could bring about a better future for all.
Not only for ourselves, but for all humankind. Sharing our history so that it can be useful for other parts of the planet who are suffering from the hardships of war. We are convinced that putting an end to armed conflicts, even the most complex ones, is possible.
We have done this, convinced that we're putting an end to armed.
Our correspondent, Karina Cartagena, has more from the UN meeting in New York.
Hello, greetings from New York. In this high-level meeting, the President of the UN General Assembly called today to put prevention in the first place to avoid the escalation of conflicts in the world. Sustainable peace is not something that can be done at the UN and delivered to countries in need. Cooperation among all is needed, he said. The Secretary General of the United Nations said that in order to avoid conflicts, more mediation as well more democracy and dialogue are necessary. At this meeting, the President of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, pointed out that drug trafficking continues to be the first threat to peace in his country. The Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza, on behalf of NAM, said to the international community that it is important to preserve peace, which should be a UN priority, and the NAM will not stop efforts in maintaining peace around the world.
Ecuador's National Assembly has approved the creation of a special commission to address security concerns on its border.
The National Assembly approved the creation of an occasional commission to discuss the situation on the border. The special commission will be made up of 19 lawmakers who will have 19 days to reform laws that concern the border areas.
The creation of a special commission in charge of the border security controlled by the National Assembly. The borderline with Colombia needs permanent patrolling and protection.
Politicians are supporting the ruling, but also highlight that the government hasn't provided much information and that action to address the current situation is necessary.
There are things that need to be clarified, like where are the bodies of the kidnapped journalists? We deserve to know the truth. We don't know anything about the couple which was presumably kidnapped. We don't know what the next steps are that the government will take in order to save them.
Meanwhile, the families of the 3 kidnapped journalists who were kidnapped and murdered at the northern border with Colombia have traveled to Washington, D.C. in the United States to meet with international organizations.
We need a special disciplinary commission to verify all the proceedings and measures taken by the government in this shameful situation, and we need international assistance along with the governments of Ecuador and Colombia.
For Ecuadorians, this situation is still new. They are demanding prompt answers about the bodies of the 3 journalists and another couple who were recently kidnapped at the border. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
And that story takes us to the break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Brazil's former President Dilma Rousseff has been banned from visiting Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva at the federal police headquarters in Curitiba, where he's being detained. The judge who made the ruling against Rousseff earlier prevented the Nobel Peace Laureate Adolfo Perez Esquivel from visiting Lula. Rousseff says the ban is intended to isolate Lula and prevent his message from reaching the people of Brazil. The Workers' Party has condemned the court's decision. The Freeland indigenous camp in Brasilia is into its second day, with conflicts over ancestral lands at the center of the protests. Our correspondent, Mia Alberti, has been talking to some of those directly affected by the violence.
Quereshui Chapiri is a member of the Guarani people from southern Brazil. Last year, her mother was attacked during her sleep and her hands were cut off.
They cut across her face, her eye, part of her ear. They cut across her forehead, her head, and then her hand. They cut it. She lost almost all of her blood. It was a miracle she survived.
Quereshu's story is just one of hundreds of cases. The attack stems from the complicated centuries-long issue of land disputes. While industries and agribusinesses try to expand their exploitation of the land, the indigenous groups try to stop them. This week, 3,000 people are camped out here in Brasilia to demand the government take action and create a Brazil for all Brazilians.
Violence, fear, despair, all of this because the Brazilian state prioritizes the agribusiness, mining or energy interests, instead of these people who have been for more than 500 years. The Brazilian state needs to realize that it serves society and not some economic interests.
Brazil has more than 1,200 indigenous territories, but only 30% are registered, and even in those cases, the law is often not respected.
Day and night, the Amazon is trespassed by miners, prospectors for land interests, because our politicians are not following the laws, which they are obliged to follow.
For 5 days and 5 nights, the Free Land Camp will seek more land demarcation, more government intervention, and less violence. Mia Alberti in Brasilia.
The construction strike in Panama is into its 6th day. Employees are refusing a wage increase requested by the workers in light of profits being generated by the industry.
Projects like this one have ground to a halt. Workers are holding firm on their offer of 10.9% a year over the next 4 years. The employers are equally locked to their offer of just 4 cents an hour in the same period. The workers say that this doesn't reflect the reality of the industry that in the last 4 years has generated $36 billion, 30 billion of that number as net profit.
They insist on only 4 cents a year. Only 4 cents. That is a handout, and we are not asking for a handout. Either they give a significant raise or the strike will continue until they do something.
This is an industry that has grown twice the GDP and is the second most thriving market. It's 8.10% higher than previous years, and so we don't understand why the Panamanian Chamber of Construction is still messing around in the negotiations.
Panamanian social movements have joined the workers. They say this struggle should be the struggle of all Panamanian workers, because 2 out of 3 workers earn less than $800.
This is an important discussion in this country. Workers deserve a salary increase. Construction workers, professionals, and everyone that is creating wealth.
The construction industry represents more than 30% of the Panamanian gross domestic product. The workers want these profits to reach everyone, especially the ones who are generating it.
Mapuche leaders in Chile have occupied a cathedral in Tumaco to demand that the government allows their spiritual leader to attend a traditional ceremony. Machi Celestino Cordova is on a hunger in prison. He's been accused of the murder of a landowner and his wife, and he's been denied permission to attend the Rewe, a site where Mapuche leaders renew their ancestral commitment to lead the indigenous people. Mapuche leaders from the Araucania region are meeting officials to try and find a solution.
We have arranged a meeting between the authorities and representatives of the Loncomachi and working people to decide what action to take. From a Mapuche spiritual and religious perspective, we need to reach a solution that respects the culture of the Mapuche people and accepts the difference between our view and that of the Chilean state.
And in Colombia, the imprisoned FARC leader Jesus Santrich continues his hunger strike, despite his FARC colleague Timon Leon Jimenez urging him to reconsider his decision.
Jesus Santrich's situation is a hard test for the FARC. Nonetheless, FARC leader Timon Leon Jimenez says that Santrich has made up his mind.
What we can see from this situation that FARC is under a lot of pressure, but internally and externally. It's forcing us to look for different ways to deal with the problems.
With Iván Márquez leaving for the Caguán zone, there is a concern about a potential crisis within the FARC.
Iván Márquez moving to the Miravalle zone means that he wants to be with ex-combatants. It would be good if more FARC leaders took the same decision. A little team is needed in Bogotá.
Colombia's government says that the complaints from Márquez and Hernán Velázquez are unacceptable.
Judicial decisions must be respected and obeyed. The government will work for that to happen. So any conditions that they try to impose on a judicial decision is unacceptable.
Some say the government must pay more attention to the real motives of the Drug Enforcement Agency in Colombia.
A thorough investigation needs to be made into what the Drug Enforcement Agency is doing in this country. They launch raids, create crime scenes, and find new ways to persecute their citizens. I think that's a serious violation of our sovereignty.
Colombia's government says it will ensure Santrich lives, even against his will, and they won't allow his condition to worsen.
In Peru, the prosecutor's office has found new evidence against former President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, who is fighting charges of corruption. Police found documents in the home of a PPK supporter when the building was raided.
The authorities found documents, agendas, and emails linked to cases in which the former president is being investigated. For example, a report on the pardon against former President Alberto Fujimori, which is believed to be evidence that such pardon was a political agreement.
This is a very strong evidence, right? It proves that there were negotiations and that the president wanted to benefit, but at the same time he was also helping someone else.
But according to the former attorney, Catherine Ampuero, the emails from December 27 contribute to the case against Kuczynski. In the messages, the former president talked with his agent in the Virgin Islands about selling one of his offshore companies. This was after he declared that while in public office, he was not involved in these businesses.
While he was minister, he was linked to Odebrecht through his company Westfield Capital. And after he became president, he continued to be involved in that company.
For Ampuero, the legal situation of Pedro Pablo Kuczynski is getting more and more complicated.
We are already talking about sufficient evidence for the prosecutor to start an investigation against him, which is the second phase of the criminal proceeding against Mr. Pedro Pablo Kuczynski.
Meanwhile, the former president is not allowed to leave the country and is waiting to appear in court before the judicial authorities and the Legislative Commission.
In Barbados, opposition leader Mia Mottley continues calls for Prime Minister Frondell Stewart to set the date for elections. Mottley, who is the head of the Barbados Labour Party, said in an open letter to the Prime Minister that the country is crumbling and grinding to a halt because of his tardiness, indecisiveness and inertia. Barbados' parliament dissolved in March and elections must be held before June 4th, but the Prime Minister shows no signs of calling the date.
Prime Minister, our country is drifting and our people are suffering. Our institutions are reeling. Problems abound and you appear indifferent to the realities of the plight of our people. Our condition is just getting worse. I am not even minded to speculate now as to what these 90 days are really all about. You and your cabinet are not attempting to solve any problems. I'm asking you, sir, in the name of all that is good and righteous, call the election.
In St. Lucia, fuel prices are now subject to a new system called the Modified Market Pass-Through Petroleum Pricing Mechanism, which is based on changes in the international oil prices over the weekend. And on Monday, the government announced an increase in fuel prices. But as the minister in the office of the Prime Minister, Dr. Eubaldas Raymond, explains, the taxes from fuel will be used for much-needed road works across the island.
So we as a government, as I said earlier, we said that in spite of these increases, we need the revenues to fix our roads because we have an ambitious road rehabilitation and maintenance program, and will ensure that we will undertake that program.
The World Bank says remittance flows into Latin America and the Caribbean grew by 8.7% in 2017. In 2018, the World Bank said remittances to the region are expected to grow by 4.3%. That's an increase in 80 billion in 2017 to 83 billion in 2018. The report says the main factors for the increase were stronger growth in the United States and tighter enforcement of U.S. immigration rules, which means that migrants remitted savings in anticipation of shorter stays in the United States. Dance music combining Andean folk and electronica is a new trend in Bolivia. Electropreste seeks to fuse the modern with the traditional, featuring traditional clothes and imagery with high-tech sound and lighting. The latest Electropreste event was held in an elegant venue known as the Cholette in the suburb of El Alto. DJ sets combine electro house and electro kumba music. And now we're going to take a look at what's making headlines around the world.
At least 6 policemen were killed and 15 others were wounded Tuesday when 3 suicide bombers blew themselves up in quick succession in southwest Pakistan. The attacks at the city of Quetta, where police have been fighting Islamist militants and separatist groups for more than a decade. Hundreds of Amazon employees protest working conditions in Berlin, where the megagroup's founder, Jeff Bezos, was due to receive a prize. The prize, given by the publisher of Germany's mass-selling daily Bild, rewards innovation in business. But the choice of Bezos has been met with anger among unions and some politicians.
It is not possible that in these times of all digital innovation, some still believe that human beings have no value, no rights to true status, and no collective agreement.
Thousands of Armenians have marched to commemorate the anniversary of the Armenian genocide, where 1.5 million people were killed by Ottoman forces in 1915. The ceremony comes a day after the country's prime minister, Serge Sargsyan, resigned following more than a week of opposition rallies.
After lengthy talks at the White House, French President Emmanuel Macron has told a joint news conference with his American counterpart, Donald Trump, that they have discussed, quote, a new Iran nuclear deal. Macron said that they would strengthen the 2015 accord along the lines that Trump wants, such as by addressing Iran's expansion in the Middle East and its ballistic missile program. Trump gave no clear signal about whether he would carry out a threat to abandon an international nuclear deal with Tehran. The Democratic Republic of Congo's opposition party has held an authorized mass rally for the first time in nearly 2 years. The rally marked the 28th anniversary of multi-party politics in the country as tensions grow over veteran President Joseph Kabila's refusal to quit despite the expiration of his mandate. Kabila has been in power since 2001 and should have stepped down at the end of 2016, but a constitutional clause has allowed him to remain in office. And that story has brought us right to the end of this news brief. But for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusyourtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Suni Gray. Thank you so much for watching.